When Laura unexpectedly announced that she was going out to dinner with a coworker, Jake's world fell apart. But instead of anger or tears, he conceived a plan that would change their lives. Was it a betrayal or just a provocation? And will Jake be able to uncover the truth without losing his love? This story of trust, revenge, and unexpected twists and turns will leave you breathless. Jake Miller, a 35-year-old marketing strategist from Chicago, slumped onto the couch after a grueling day at the office. His laptop bag sat untouched by the door, emails piling up, but his mind was too foggy to care. The city's hum drifted through the open window, a distant reminder of life outside their quiet apartment. He was halfway through a mindless scroll on his phone when Laura, his wife of 7 years, walked into the room. Her steps were deliberate, her posture unusually stiff, like someone bracing for impact. Laura, a 32-year-old graphic designer, stood in front of him, her phone clutched tightly in one hand. Without preamble, she dropped the bomb. "This Friday, I'm going out to dinner with Nate," she said, her voice calm but edged with something Jake couldn't quite place. Nate was her coworker, a charismatic project manager known for his ambition and late-night brainstorming sessions. Jake's stomach twisted. Dinner? With Nate? His mind raced, conjuring images of candlelit tables and private smiles, but he forced his face to stay neutral. "Is that so?" Jake replied, his tone clipped, masking the storm brewing inside. He leaned back, crossing his arms, his eyes locked on hers. "Sounds fun. Actually, I've been thinking about asking Emma out myself. You know, my co-worker from the creative team. You cool with that?" His words were a calculated jab, thrown with a smirk he didn't feel. He wanted to see her flinch, to gauge if this was a game or something worse. Laura froze. Her fingers tightened around her phone, and for a split second, her confident facade cracked. Her eyes widened, searching his face, as if she hadn't expected him to fire back. "Sure," she said after a beat, her voice quieter now, almost uncertain. "Why would I mind?" But the words sounded hollow, and Jake caught the slight tremor in her hand as she turned away, heading toward the kitchen. The air in the room thickened, heavy with unspoken questions. Jake's pulse hammered in his ears. Was she serious? Was this a test, a provocation, or an actual betrayal? He'd always trusted Laura, her loyalty as steady as the Chicago skyline. But now, doubt crept in like a thief, stealing the comfort of their routine. He replayed her words, dissecting her tone, her body language. Nate wasn't just a coworker. Jake had seen the way he lingered at Laura's desk during office happy hours, his laughs too loud, his glances too long. Jake's first instinct was to confront her, to demand answers. Why Nate? Why now? But something held him back. If Laura was playing a game, he'd play smarter. He wasn't about to beg or yell. That would only give her the upper hand. Instead, he leaned into the charade. "Great," he called after her, his voice dripping with forced nonchalance. "I'll text Emma tonight. Maybe we'll hit that new bar downtown." He didn't even like Emma that way. She was just a friendly colleague who'd once helped him nail a pitch, but Laura didn't need to know that. The silence that followed was deafening. Laura didn't respond, but Jake heard the faint clink of dishes in the sink, a telltale sign she was avoiding him. He stayed on the couch, staring at the TV without seeing it, his mind spinning. Was she calling his bluff? Or was she actually planning to cross a line? The thought made his chest tighten, a mix of anger and fear he hadn't felt since their early days, when jealousy was just a spark they laughed off. Over the next 2 days, their apartment became a battlefield of subtle slights. Laura was glued to her phone, typing furiously, her screen angled away from Jake's view. He caught himself checking her social media, something he'd never done before. Nate's name popped up in her recent likes, a photo of him at a networking event, grinning in a sharp blazer. Jake's jaw clenched. He didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband stalking his wife's online activity, but the seed of doubt had taken root. To up the ante, Jake texted Emma, keeping it vague. "Hey, you free Friday? Could use a drink and some work talk." Her reply was quick, friendly but professional. "Sure, sounds good. Let me check my schedule." He didn't plan to follow through, but the message was enough to keep Laura guessing. When he casually mentioned it at breakfast, Laura's fork paused midair, her eyes narrowing for a fraction of a second before she forced a smile. "Hope you have fun," she said, her voice tight. By Thursday, Jake's nerves were frayed. He couldn't focus at work, his presentations half-hearted, his thoughts consumed by Laura's dinner with Nate. Was it just a friendly meetup? A professional thing? Or something more? He remembered a conversation from months ago, Laura mentioning Nate's big ideas about launching a startup. Was this dinner tied to that? Or was it personal? The uncertainty gnawed at him, and for the first time, Jake questioned not just Laura, but himself. Had he been distant? Had he missed signs that she was unhappy? That night, as Laura scrolled through her phone in bed, the screen's glow casting shadows across the room, Jake made a decision. He wouldn't confront her yet. He let Friday play out, but he wouldn't sit idly by. If Laura was testing him, he'd find out. If she was betraying him, he'd know that too. He didn't have a plan beyond showing up, but the need to see the truth with his own eyes was overwhelming. As he drifted into a restless sleep, the image of Laura and Nate laughing together burned in his mind, setting the stage for a night that would change everything. James sat at his desk in a Chicago marketing firm, his computer screen a blur of spreadsheets he couldn't focus on. It was Wednesday, 2 days after Lauren's bombshell about her dinner with Nate, and the air between them had turned toxic. Their apartment, once a haven of shared laughter, now felt like a chessboard where every move was calculated. James's phone buzzed with a notification, a new post from Lauren's work account, a vague caption about exciting opportunities. His gut twisted. Was this about Nate's startup idea she'd mentioned months ago, or was something else entirely? At home, the tension was palpable. Lauren barely looked up from her phone, her fingers flying across the screen, shielding it when James passed by. He caught a glimpse of Nate's name in a message thread before she tilted the phone away. "Work stuff," she muttered, her voice clipped when he lingered too long. James didn't push, but the secrecy fueled his suspicions. He'd never been the jealous type, but now every ping from her phone felt like a jab to his chest. To keep up his side of the game, James doubled down on his bluff about Emma. During a coffee break, he texted her again, "Friday still good?" Thinking we could grab drinks at that rooftop spot. Emma's reply was enthusiastic. "Totally, let's do it. I'll confirm tomorrow." He didn't intend to go through with it. Emma was just a pawn in this escalating charade, but the act of texting her in front of Lauren felt like a small victory. Lauren's eyes flicked toward him, her jaw tightening, but she said nothing, just turned back to her phone. That night, James scrolled through Nate's social media, something he'd never done before. The guy's profile was a mix of corporate jargon and self-assured charm. Photos from industry events, a post about disrupting the design world, even a comment on Lauren's latest work post with a winking emoji. James's grip on his phone tightened. Was Nate flirting, or was this just his personality? The uncertainty was maddening, and James hated how it made him feel, like he was losing control of something he'd taken for granted. At dinner, the silence was heavy. Lauren pushed food around her plate, her phone face down beside her. James broke the quiet with a calculated jab. "So, you and Nate must be pretty close, huh? Planning a big night?" His tone was light, but his eyes were sharp, watching for any crack in her armor. Lauren's fork froze mid-air, her lips parting as if to snap back, but she caught herself. "It's just dinner, James," she said, her voice steady but her fingers tapping nervously on the table. "You're making it a bigger deal than it is." "Am I?" He shot back, leaning forward. "Because you didn't mention it until it was a done deal. What's next, late-night work meetings?" The words slipped out harsher than he'd meant, and Lauren's eyes narrowed. "You're one to talk," she countered. "What's with you and Emma? Suddenly best friends?" Her voice carried a sting, and for a moment, James felt a flicker of satisfaction. She was rattled. Good. But the victory was short-lived, replaced by a gnawing question. Was this really about Nate, or was Lauren testing him? The next day, James's paranoia crept into his work. During a team meeting, he overheard a colleague mention Nate's name in passing, a rumor about a new project he was pitching to the firm's higher-ups. Was Lauren involved? She'd been vague about her recent workload, mentioning only big changes at the office. James's mind spun. What if this dinner wasn't personal, but professional? But then why hide it? And why Nate, of all people, whose charm had always set James on edge? By Thursday evening, the game was wearing him down. Lauren was in the living room, typing furiously, her phone buzzing every few minutes. James couldn't resist. "Nate keeping you busy?" he asked, leaning against the doorway, his voice laced with sarcasm. Lauren didn't look up. "It's work, James. You wouldn't get it." Her dismissal stung, and he felt the urge to escalate, to call her bluff. Instead, he grabbed his jacket. "I'm heading out for a bit," he said, not waiting for her response. He needed air, space to think. Outside, Chicago's streets were alive with noise, but James felt isolated. He walked aimlessly, replaying every moment of the past few days. Lauren's secrecy, her guarded phone, Nate's smug online presence. It all pointed to something, but what? He considered confronting her outright, but the thought of her lying, or worse, admitting something, stopped him cold. Instead, he decided to play the game one step further. He texted Emma, "All set for tomorrow. 7 p.m. work." Her quick, "perfect," felt like a lifeline, even if he wasn't sure he'd use it. As he walked back home, James's resolve hardened. Friday was tomorrow, and he'd find out what Lauren was really up to. He didn't know if he'd follow her, confront her, or let the night play out, but one thing was clear. He couldn't keep living in this limbo. The game of cat and mouse was pushing them both toward a breaking point, and James wasn't sure if he was the hunter or the prey. Friday arrived like a storm cloud over Chicago, the weight of it pressing on James's chest. He sat in his office, staring at a client brief he hadn't touched in hours. His mind was elsewhere, tangled in the web of Lauren's dinner with Nate. The clock ticked closer to 6 p.m., and with every passing minute, his resolve to uncover the truth grew stronger. He hadn't planned to follow her. Spying felt beneath him, but the gnawing doubt was unbearable. Was Lauren really meeting Nate for work, or was something deeper at play? At home, Lauren was already preparing to leave. James lingered in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through emails, but his attention was fixed on her. She moved with purpose, grabbing her keys and checking her phone with quick, deliberate glances. "I'll be back by 9, she said, her voice flat, avoiding his gaze. James nodded, his throat tight. "Have fun," he replied, the words sharp enough to cut. Lauren hesitated at the door, her hand lingering on the knob, as if she wanted to say something. But she didn't. The door clicked shut behind her. James waited 5 minutes, his heart pounding. He grabbed his car keys, driven by an impulse he couldn't shake. The drive to downtown was a blur, Chicago's neon lights streaking past as he navigated toward the upscale restaurant Nate had once bragged about on social media. James parked across the street, his car tucked between two others, giving him a clear view of the entrance. He felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad thriller. But he couldn't stop now. He needed to see. Minutes later, Lauren appeared, stepping out of cab. She paused outside the restaurant, her posture tense, her phone pressed to her ear for a brief call before she slipped it into her bag. James's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Then Nate arrived, striding up with his usual confidence, shaking hands with Lauren in a way that seemed too formal for a date. They walked inside, taking a table near the window. James leaned forward, his breath shallow, watching their every move. To his surprise, the scene wasn't what he'd braced for. There were no lingering touches or intimate smiles. Nate spread out papers on the table, pointing at them with animated gestures, while Lauren listened intently, her posture rigid. She nodded occasionally, her fingers tapping the edge of her glass, a nervous habit James recognized from her high-stakes work meetings. This wasn't a romantic dinner. It looked like a business pitch. James's shoulders relaxed slightly, but the relief was short-lived. Why hadn't she told him? His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. A text from Emma. "Hey, something came up. Can we reschedule drinks?" James exhaled, a mix of disappointment and gratitude. He'd been using Emma as a shield, a way to match Lauren's game, but her cancellation left him exposed. He typed a quick, "No worries," another time, and turned his attention back to the restaurant. As he watched, a new detail caught his eye. Lauren pulled out her phone, showing Nate something on the screen. He leaned closer, nodding, but his hand brushed hers for a moment too long. James's stomach churned. Was he reading too much into it? Then Lauren laughed, a sharp, polite sound, not the warm chuckle she shared with James in their better days. The interaction felt professional, but something was off. James's mind flashed back to a conversation months ago, when Lauren mentioned Nate's big ideas for a startup. She'd brushed it off then, but had there been more? A memory surfaced. Lauren once laughing off Nate's flirty comment at a company party. Had she downplayed it to protect James's feelings? The pieces started to click. This dinner was about Nate's startup. James was almost sure of it. But the secrecy, the way Lauren had sprung it on him, suggested more. Had Nate crossed the line before? Was Lauren testing James, or hiding something worse? He remembered a late-night call she'd taken last month, stepping outside to talk. She'd said it was a client, but now James wasn't so sure. His fingers drummed on the dashboard, torn between storming in and driving away. Then a shift. Nate leaned back, his tone growing serious, almost pleading. Lauren's posture changed. She sat up straighter, her hands clasped tightly. She shook her head, her expression firm, and Nate's shoulders slumped. Whatever he'd proposed, she wasn't buying it. James felt a flicker of pride, but it was drowned out by a new realization. Lauren had kept him in the dark, and that hurt more than the thought of a date. She hadn't trusted him with the truth, and he hadn't trusted her enough to ask. As Lauren and Nate stood to leave, James ducked lower in his seat. They parted outside with a quick handshake, Nate lingering a moment before walking away. Lauren hailed a cab, her movements brisk, like she was eager to escape. James sat there, his car engine off, the night air heavy. He'd come looking for betrayal, but found something else, a glimpse of Lauren's ambition and his own failure to see it. But the question lingered. Why had she hidden this? And what did Nate's past feelings for her mean? James started the car, his mind racing. He wouldn't confront her tonight. Not yet. But tomorrow they'd talk. No more games, no more bluffs. He needed answers, and so did she. James sat in the dim glow of the living room, the hum of Chicago's nightlife filtering through the window. It was late Friday night, and Lauren's cab would pull up any minute. His keys lay untouched on the coffee table, his earlier impulse to follow her now replaced by a resolve to face the truth head-on. The restaurant scene replayed in his mind. Lauren's firm rejection of Nate's pitch, the professional distance between them, the lingering question of why she'd hidden it. James's fingers tapped restlessly against his knee, his pulse steady but heavy. No more games. The door clicked open, and Lauren stepped inside, her keys jingling as she set them down. She froze when she saw James waiting, his posture rigid, his eyes locked on her. "You're up," she said, her voice cautious, like she was stepping into a trap. She slid her phone in her bag, her movements deliberate, avoiding his gaze. James didn't respond immediately, letting the silence stretch, forcing her to feel the weight of it. "How was your night?" he asked, his tone low, stripped of the sarcasm he'd wielded earlier in the week. Lauren hesitated, her fingers tightening around her bag strap. "Fine," she said too quickly. "Just work stuff with Nate." Her words were clipped, and James caught the slight waver in her voice, a crack in her usual confidence. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his stare unwavering. "Work stuff," he repeated. "That's it." Lauren's shoulders stiffened. She crossed her arms, finally meeting his eyes. "What do you want me to say, James?" It was a meeting about his startup. Nothing else. Her defensiveness only fueled his need for clarity. He stood, closing the distance between them, his voice steady but firm. "Then why didn't you tell me from the start? Why spring it on me like a test? You knew how it'd look." The accusation hung in the air. Lauren's lips parted, but no words came at first. She turned away, pacing a few steps, her hands fidgeting. "I didn't think you'd care," she said finally, her voice softer, almost breaking. "You've been so distant lately, buried in work, barely noticing me. I thought maybe you'd react if I pushed you." Her admission hit James like a punch, raw and unexpected. He'd expected excuses, not this. "Push me," he shot back, his voice rising despite himself. "By making me think you were going on a date? That's not pushing, Lauren. That's playing with fire." He took a breath, steadying himself, his hands clenched at his sides. "I saw you tonight. At the restaurant. It wasn't a date, but you let me believe it could be." "What?" The confession slipped out before he could stop it, and Lauren's eyes widened, her breath catching. "You followed me?" she asked, her voice a mix of shock and hurt. James didn't flinch, though guilt gnawed at him. "I had to," he said. "You weren't giving me answers. I saw you with Nate, talking business, shutting him down. But I also know he's got a history with you. That flirty comment at the Christmas party. You laughed it off, but it meant something, didn't it?" His words were sharp, cutting through the pretense they'd both built. Lauren's hands dropped to her sides, her posture deflating. "It was nothing," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Nate had a crush years ago, before we were serious. I never encouraged it. Tonight was just about his startup. He wanted me to join as a partner. I said no." She paused, her eyes searching his. "But you're right. I should have told you. I was scared you didn't care anymore." The honesty in her voice disarmed James, but it didn't erase the sting. "Scared," he said, softer now. Lauren, I've always cared. But when you pull stunts like this, it makes me question everything. I started this stupid game with Emma to get back at you, but I didn't even go through with it. I couldn't. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration spilling over. We're tearing each other apart over nothing. Lauren stepped closer, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted to know if we still mattered. I felt invisible, James. You're always working late, always distracted. I thought maybe you'd fight for us. Her words cut deeper than any argument, exposing a truth James hadn't faced. His own neglect had pushed her to this. He sank onto the couch, the fight draining out of him. I should have seen it, he admitted, his voice low. I got so caught up in work, in my own head, I didn't notice you were slipping away. But this, he gestured between them, this isn't how we fix it. We can't keep hurting each other to prove a point. Lauren sat beside him, close but not touching. The distance For a moment, neither spoke. The city's hum outside was the only sound, a reminder of the world moving on. What now? Lauren asked, her voice small, vulnerable in a way James hadn't heard in years. He looked at her, seeing not just the woman he'd married, but the one he'd failed to listen to. We stop the games, he said firmly. We talk. Really talk. No more secrets, no more tests. If we're going to save this, we do it together. Lauren nodded, her fingers brushing his hand, a tentative gesture. I'm in, she said, her voice steadying. But it's going to take work. James squeezed her hand, a silent promise. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in days, he felt a spark of hope. They'd cross a line, but maybe they could find their way back. The following Saturday morning, James and Lauren sat across from each other at a small coffee shop in Chicago's Loop, the clatter of cups and murmured conversations filling the air. It was their first outing since the confrontation, a tentative step toward rebuilding what they'd nearly lost. James stirred his coffee, his movements slow, deliberate, as he grappled with the weight of their recent choices. Lauren's fingers traced the rim of her mug, her gaze fixed on the table, but her posture was less guarded than it had been in days. They'd agreed to meet here, away from the charged atmosphere of their apartment, to talk without distractions. The night before, after their raw exchange, they'd stayed up late, laying bare their fears and failures. James had admitted how his work obsession had blinded him to Lauren's needs, while she confessed that her dinner with Nate was a desperate bid to spark a reaction, to feel seen. Now, in the light of day, they faced the harder task, moving forward. I called a therapist, Lauren said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened around her mug, betraying a lingering unease. She's got openings next week. I think we should go together. James nodded, relief washing over him. He'd been the one to suggest counseling during their late-night talk, but hearing Lauren take the step felt like a commitment, a sign she was all in. Good, he said, his voice soft but firm. I want this to work, Lauren. I want us to work. She met his eyes, her expression a mix of resolve and vulnerability. Me too, but we have to be honest. No more holding back. Her words carried the weight of their recent mistakes, a reminder of how close they'd come to breaking apart. James reached across the table, his hand covering hers, a small gesture that felt monumental after days of distance. No more holding back, he echoed. The week had been a reckoning. After the restaurant, James had wrestled with his guilt for spying, while Lauren grappled with her choice to manipulate him. They'd both played a dangerous game, letting pride and insecurity drive them to hurt each other. But the confrontation had cracked open something raw and real, forcing them to see the cracks in their marriage. Not just the dinner with Nate, but the months of drifting apart, the unspoken resentments that had festered. On Monday, Lauren had taken another step. She'd met with Nate at the office, not to discuss his startup, but to set boundaries. I told him I'm out, she said now, her voice firm. No partnership, no collaboración. I made it clear my priority is us. James raised an eyebrow, surprised by her decisiveness. How'd he take it? He asked. Lauren shrugged, her fingers relaxing around the mug. Not great. He tried to argue, but I didn't budge. He apologized for any misunderstanding, said he didn't mean to cause trouble. James leaned back, processing her words. Nate's apology didn't erase the unease his past flirtations had caused, but Lauren's choice to cut ties was a clear signal. She wasn't just apologizing, She was acting on it. I'm glad you did that, James said, his voice low. I should have trusted you more. Ask questions instead of assuming the worst. He paused, his thumb brushing over her hand. I let my ego get in the way. Lauren squeezed his hand, a small smile breaking through. We both did. I thought pushing you would wake you up, but it just made things worse. I'm sorry, Vings. The sincerity in her voice cut through the last of his defenses. He'd spent days building walls, sarcasm, suspicion, the fake plan with Emma. But now, sitting here, he saw the truth. They'd both been fighting for the same thing, just in the wrong ways. The therapist number was saved on both their phones, a tangible step toward healing. They'd also agreed to small changes. No phones at dinner, weekly check-ins to talk about work and feelings, not just logistics. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was a start. James thought back to the restaurant. How Lauren's firm rejection of Nate's pitch had sparked both pride and shame in him. He'd misread her, but she'd misread him too. They'd both assumed the other had stopped caring, when really, they'd been screaming for attention in their own flawed ways. As they left the coffee shop, walking side by side through the bustling loop, James felt a shift. The city's noise was just background now, not a distraction from their silence. Lauren slipped her hand into his, her grip tentative but warm. We're going to be okay, right? She asked, her voice soft but hopeful. James squeezed her hand, his resolve stronger than it had been in weeks. Yeah, he said. We'll figure it out. Together. They weren't fixed. Not yet. Trust would take time, and scars from their games would linger. But for the first time in days, James believed they could rebuild. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other, even after the mistakes. As they walked, the weight of the week began to lift, replaced by a quiet promise to do better, to be better for each other.